The Money Show. Personal finance.
Warren Ingram from Galileo Capital is with us on a Thursday night. He's back again. Retrenchment. And it's an unfortunate and brutal, terrible 21st century reality in South Africa. Practically zero growth, very little business confidence, very little optimism about the future. Companies can't grow their revenues, so they cut back. The best place to cut back is in the wage bill, and people are falling foul of that. They're finding themselves laid off.
Yeah, I mean, I think, when management of listed companies, for example, are under pressure to grow their profits no matter what, then where, if you can't grow your revenue, you have to shrink your costs, and you can only shrink your buildings so much and sell things so much before you start to cut staff. And I think I can see it in the volume of queries that we're getting, that this is becoming something that's, I mean, not a new trend. I guess it's been around for a while now, but it's there. People are asking for information all the time about this. So it's
people are saying, I have been retrenched, or I fear I may be retrenched. How do I retrench proof my finances?
Yeah. So I think you're seeing a mix. So some people coming along and saying, I have, now what do I do? And unfortunately, that's a little bit late. So there, of course, there are certain things you can do. We'll talk about that. But a greater number saying, I see some smoke on the horizon, and unfortunately, there's I think it might be coming my way. And what do I do? What steps can I take?
I mean, it's such a sensible thing to be thinking about and to be acting on. And essentially what you've got to do is put a moat around your personal finances. You've actually got to build up a reserve to tide you over what could be a depressing time, a time where the last thing you want to do is put out a CV and go on the jobs market and be all shiny and happy, because people say, hey, what happened to your last job? Well, I got retrenched. Yeah. And so you've got to bear in mind that psychologically it's a tough time, emotionally a very tough time, because why was I chosen to be retrenched, or why was it me and not Johnny down 3 cubicles down who's
absolutely useless,
who's completely stupid, and I used to do all his work for him.
Yeah.
And there's the financial cost of this thing. Suddenly, hold on a second, we're barely making the mortgage payments as it is, and now being laid off.
So I think the big thing with all big financial decisions always is, if you can set your game plan up front before the event happens, it always enables you to make better financial decisions, better emotional decisions, and then better lifestyle, family decisions now. So if we know there's potentially a problem coming, but it's not immediately there, then as human beings we can sit down, we can rationalize in a much better way, and then when the event happens, we don't have to think. We've already got our game plan. It's almost just like you pull out your little piece of paper and say, if this happens, what do I do? Because you've thought about it, you've strategized. So absolutely, I think it's almost as if and it's unusual to say go to war when we're talking about money, but that's what you've got to do. You say to yourself, it's the same mental approach that you would have if there was a war coming. You've got to batten down the hatches and get ready for trouble that potentially comes. If it doesn't come, well, all that's happened is you've probably put yourself in a slightly better financial position than you would have been, and there's no downside to that. But if you can see in your industry or in your company things are not great, then take action. And I think it starts with having some sort of a game plan. And step one is, look at your financial position, that moat that you were talking about. So I would always say, try and have about 3 months worth of your expenses sitting in a money market account.
That's a lot of money.
Well, it's about to get more, because what I'd say is that's for normal situations. If you can see retrenchments coming, then you want to try and push it up to at least 6 months worth of expenses. And I know it's a lot of money, but the point is, you don't want to be looking for a job under massive financial pressure, because you don't
want to have to accept the first thing that comes along.
Yeah.
Because that first thing might come along 3 or 4 months from now, by which time you're accepting knockdown rates, you are underselling yourself, you're undervaluing yourself. You want to be able to resist having to accept the first offer that comes along.
And I think what happens in interview situations is that if you're desperate, just from a financial point of view, that desperation unfortunately doesn't translate well just into an interview situation. You don't come across as the best version of yourself when you're sitting there. Whereas if you've got 6 months worth of expenses and you know that you can cover those, then you're going to be somewhat more relaxed. Of course, it's never going to be a relaxing situation, but you want to stack the odds
cards in your favor.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, before we carry on, can we sort of jump ahead? Because I don't want to keep Tupac's been retrenched. I don't want to keep Tupac holding on the line for too long, because holding on the line is expensive. Because I'm concerned about you, Tupac. How's it? You've been retrenched, Tupac. I'm sorry.
I have, guys. I've been retrenched as of this month. I'm unemployed. My question, I'm in the fortunate position to have 6 months costs covered, but it's around my Provident Fund. So I've got to transfer that out. I've got a lump sum of about 600,000 Rand. I've done the sums. I've got 25 years left to retirement. The rates that the fees that are charged with some of these big companies, I did the sums, and I was pretty shocked to learn the amount I will have paid them to preserve that money for the next 25 years at a very average return. There's some other guys that are coming in at about 1% fees, and then there's the thought that I could cash it out and just take the tax hit now and put it into some kind of passive tracker. I just wanted Warren's thoughts on what to do with the Provident Fund with retrenchment.
It feeds very neatly into our next point, Tubak. Thank you very much, and I'm so glad you made the call.
Okay, so I think it's I like the way you're thinking about the passive or the low cost. The focus on fees is a very important one, and what I'd say to you, there are great product providers out there that will offer you the preservation fund option, but you can go into the passive at a very low cost.
Okay, now 5 steps back, please. So you're in a company pension fund, and it's managed by, I don't know, Alexander Forbes.
Yeah.
And you now have to take that money and put it into a preservation fund. You can't just simply transfer it into an RA of your own.
Well, you could do that.
Okay.
But he's got a Provident Fund, and why that's important is because you are allowed in the life of a Provident Fund, you are allowed to withdraw it. If you make that call, and that's what he's thinking about now. Is if he withdraws it, he's going to that money is going to be added to his taxable income. And so if you think about it, so he's saying 600,000, and he's worked for most of or no, not really, but he's worked for some of this tax year already. So most likely he's going to end up paying around 40% tax on his. So Tupac, the one thing you really shouldn't do unless you're absolutely desperate is cash that Provident Fund in. Unfortunately, 80% of South Africans do that. And it's really, that's absolute wealth destruction.
Okay, but what he's trying to do is avoid the cost of putting his money into a preservation fund, because the options he's looked at preservation funds are expensive. So does he take the 40% tax hit and put it into a low-cost investment, or does he simply suck up the cost associated with preservation funds?
Yeah, and I think the point is that there are good low-cost preservation funds. So you can't, the cost is not going to be that high. 1% is really not a bad cost to pay for a preservation fund. So I think absolutely, please don't cash it in, whatever you do. And then well done on the 6 months of expenses, which puts him, in probably the top 1% of planning, people who actually plan correctly. So he's going to be fine. And the irony of all of this is he'll probably get a job in a month's time because he's planning.
Good for him.
Yeah.
And then don't be tempted to go and raid the kitty. To go, oh, good, I'm so relieved now I can have a holiday and go and spend it all in Mauritius or something.
And I think that's what we saw with Julia. I mean, she got retrenched somewhere in her career, and because she'd done her planning so well, this is Julia, the rock star saver.
Yes.
She could negotiate a fantastic new package with a new company because she was financially, prepared for the worst.
Yeah. No, look, I mean, preparation is so important. And again, absolutely critical to not dip into retirement savings. You've got to preserve those retirement savings at all costs.
So if we move on to what's another point to consider, if you can see this coming, is and for someone like Tupac important as well, is look at your short-term debts. So if you've got credit card debts, personal loans, overdrafts, etc., and you think there's a retrenchment issue on the horizon, those are the things that you nail down as fast as you possibly can. Get that debt out of your life as quickly as you can. If needs be, you might even want to consider selling assets, because the problem with credit card debt and overdraft is it's probably costing you around 20-25% a year in interest, and there is just no chance that you can carry that if you don't have an income to set that off. So I think that's a big one, and then I think that if you are in a situation where you've got short-term debts and you've got a home loan, as a real last resort, you might say, okay, let me take money from the home loan and at least settle my credit card debt, because the home loan's probably costing you 10 or 11% if you're paying a lot, whereas your credit card's costing you 25. That's not a normal day-to-day life plan about what everyone should be doing with their money. This is now, we're in war mode here, and so this is a drastic measure to protect yourself from an even worse outcome. I'm not saying this is a great thing to do normally.
And reduce your expenses as much as you possibly can while you're doing this.
Absolutely, and again, if you're really planning for really tough times, and you do cut those costs down, you're at least giving yourself some breathing room. And if you've got those 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months worth of expenses, but you've managed to reduce your expenses down, that means you've got maybe 7 or 8 months worth of expenses. So it's all round. It's one of those things. Don't avoid the situation, and don't sit there saying, "Oh, it'll happen to someone else." Plan for it now, and hope it does, and then hope that it doesn't happen. But you've got the game plan set.
It's always really good. I mean, you could bump your head, you could fall off your bicycle, anything could happen that could put you out of work at any point. And unless you're well insured, you need to be able to cover yourself during downtime. I mean, it's good basic financial advice, whether you are expecting to be retrenched or not. And we should all have it in place.
And I think in the state of our economy now, it's not a bad thing for all of us to be doing anyway. It's just to say, let's just get our lives in order so that this happens. If it does happen to us by surprise, we're okay. Don't just expect that now my industry's in trouble. Now let me take action. Just take action.
Warren Ingram from Galileo Capital.